Welcome back. This is our second recording for week 6. Our topic this week is gender. And just as a reminder, go ahead and grab your lecture quizzes. We will be answering some questions coming right up here. So I just wanted to review. This is from, week 3, social norms and roles. So social norms are culturally defined standards or rules of conduct. And social roles are sets of expectations, including rights, obligations, behaviors, and duties associated with a particular status. So we'll be talking about social norms and social roles related to gender here tonight. I also wanted to review social construction, which we have reviewed pretty much every week, and you should be pretty good about now. Social constructionism is a perspective that suggests that something is only real, meaningful, or valuable when society deems it so, and it becomes that way through social interaction. So to remind you, one of the things that we've talked about week after week is breakfast here in regards to social constructionism. So this particular meal, this grouping of food that we call breakfast, has been socially constructed to have the meaning of breakfast. It symbolizes breakfast to us. But in fact, there's nothing intrinsic about the food that makes it an objective choice that we would choose this particular food. In fact, we could choose any healthy, nutritious meal to eat for breakfast in the morning. And it has been socially constructed to include these foods through the process of social interaction. So social norms, statuses, and roles are socially constructed, just like the breakfast was. How they are socially constructed depends on the culture that they are found in. As you know from our discussion on socialization, we learn social norms and roles through socialization and agents of socialization such as our family, school, peers, and the media. So what I mean when I say that how social norms, statuses, and roles are socially constructed depends on the culture that they are found in, what I mean by that is that different cultures have different roles for people based on various statuses, and they differ depending on what culture that you are in. So in our culture, for instance, it is more often than not the case that elementary school teachers and preschool teachers are females, and that is a role. It's a social norm that has to do with statuses and roles in our society. Although there are male teachers at the elementary and preschool levels, it is the norm that they are females, and that might not be the case in all cultures. And so that is a socially constructed norm. There's nothing better or more natural or more intrinsic about females being teachers at that level than males. So in the United States, we have some traditional gender roles and traits. And the question is, are these traditionally male or female based on biology or based on socialization? Remember, we talked about that before, the nature-nurture debate. So men are often seen as leaders, as strong, unemotional, breadwinners, and their professions are often managers, sales, lawyers, carpenters. Women are seen as nurturing, caring, emotional, supportive, and female professions often include teacher, nurse, nanny, and psychologist. And these are based on the characteristics like being nurturing, caring, and emotional. So the question is this biology or is this socialization? Have we learned it? Does it come naturally to us physiologically, or does it come to us that we have learned these roles? In sociology, we generally discuss these as socially learned roles with biology thrown in. So when we talk about gender, we have two terms that we use, and it's important to distinguish between them. Sex refers to the natural or biological differences that distinguish males and females. So it's the appearance of the genitalia at birth is what we refer to as sex. Gender is a social construct that consists of a set of social arrangements that are built around sex. There are biological and sociological arguments for the way sex and gender are associated with each other, and we will be discussing these in a minute. So, no one can dispute that biological differences exist between the sexes. However, what we make of those differences does not inevitably arise out of the biological. Gender is a social construction. Remember, gender is a social construct that consists of a set of social arrangements that are built around sex. So gender is generally refers to our gender roles. So gender is a social construction, but it's so deeply rooted and seemingly natural that it is a major structure organizing our everyday lives. Everything is touched by gender constructions in our lives. Although we call gender a social construction, that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It does matter. Gender and the way we construct it has profound consequences for the life chances for men and women. The study of gender boils down to seeing how the two sides, sex and gender, nature and nurture, overlap, penetrate, and shape each other. So one thing is clear, that the traditional way of talking about gender is as a binary sex system with two categories and only two categories, male and female. And what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about sex and not gender. So for the sake of your lecture quizzes, I want to point out that I already said that gender is a social construction. Okay? So we operate in our culture generally according to a binary sex system traditionally. This means that that our traditional gender system has two categories, male and female, which is based on the appearance of the genitalia at birth. However, some small portion of people are born with ambiguous genitalia or differentiation in the sex chromosomes at birth. These are called intersex births. These are people that are not the typical XX or XY chromosomes. They don't fit into those categories. Or their genitalia is ambiguous. So it's not easy to tell what their sex is by just looking at them. So what happens to babies when they're born in this way? Doctors still recommend surgery to make what are called intersex children conform to an ideal of normal genitalia for one sex or another. Most people think that this applies to only a very few number of people, but in fact it's more common than you may think. It's estimated that the number of people who differ from the male-female binary category, and remember, I'm talking about sex here, not gender, may be as high as 2% of live births, although other sources estimate a lower number. It is estimated that 1% of live births in the United States exhibit some degree of sexual ambiguity, and between 0.1% and 0.2% of live births undergo surgery to assign them a sexual category. This is between 4,000 and 8,000 babies per year undergo surgery to force intersex children into one of the two binary sex categories, male or female. Sexual ambiguity may be genital ambiguity. It may be combinations of chromosomes that differ from the standard XY male or XY female. So I just answered your first quiz question, which is the percent of live births in the U.S. who undergo surgery to fit into a sex category. The answer is the third choice. It's between 0.1 and 0.2%. And I'm about to answer the second one. In Australia, they have used a legal third sex category on passports and other IDs since 2003, which is the sex category is called X. So there's male, female, and X on passports, Australian passports. In Germany, you can now register a child as indeterminate for their sex category on their birth certificate. And so that is the answer to your quiz question 2. It's the fourth option, Germany. So here, what we're talking about is sex, biological sex, so the appearance of the genitalia at birth, and not gender. So given this, we have to ask, why do we have this need to classify people according to these two categories, even to the point of surgically altering people to make them fit? And according to sociologists, the reason that we do that is because it helps us to organize our world, and it helps us to make sense of a very complicated, massive population. But of course, it also hinders our ability to see and accept difference. So here we've been talking about sex. But gender is even more complicated because gender is about the social categories we take from sex, often thought of as masculine or feminine. We think of gender as flowing from sex, but does it? So when we talk about people who are trans, generally when we're talking about people who are trans or who are gender fluid or who are gender nonconforming in one way or another, usually we're not talking about sex in the, our strict definition here. We're not generally talking about biological differences. What we're generally talking about are differences in gender. In this week's response journal, you are asked to talk about the gender spectrum. The gender spectrum, where's my notes about the gender spectrum? Hold on. So the gender spectrum, it's important for us to talk about people who do not fit neatly into the normative social construction of gender and the binary category that we have there of masculinity or femininity. And so it's important for us to see gender in a different light and in a more expansive light. If we consider, instead of just a traditional male, female, binary sex category, that's not very inclusive. If we consider instead a gender spectrum, like the one that you see on your screen right now, then we would all have a chance to fit into the gender spectrum somewhere. Seeing gender as a spectrum rather than a binary system allows for us to view gender and gender roles in a way that is more inclusive of all of us. And I don't just mean inclusive of people on the binary system, and I don't just mean people who are gender nonconforming. I'm talking about everybody. Everybody fits into the gender spectrum somewhere. We can also consider a gender continuum, but I don't have time to talk about that today. So, I will see you on our third